Back to the right side, still looking. Tyrod waiting. Tyrod scrambling. Back at the 20, fires, end zone, and is caught for the touchdown by Roberts. It's a miracle in Blacksburg. Tyrod did it, Mikey. Tyrod did it. Here's an end around to Roscoe Parrish. Hokies have this one read well. Parrish cuts it back inside and loses the ball. Taken right away from D'Angelo Hall. He's sprinting down the sidelines. D'Angelo Hall into the end zone. Touchdown Tech. It was an end around to Roscoe Parrish. And D'Angelo Hall took it right out of his hands. He said, "Give it to me, Roscoe. Give it to me." And down the sidelines, Hall went. Touchdown Tech. Here they come again on third down. Vic back to throw, in trouble. Running, gets to the 20, 25, 30. There he goes, folks, across the 40, down the left sideline. Big and open field, cuts back right to the 20. It's unbelievable. The 15 stops, jukes, dives, spinning, end zone, touchdown Tech.
Oh, my goodness.
It's the most unbelievable play you've ever seen. Hand him the Heisman. Give it to him right now.
Oh, legendary stuff. And speaking of, Bill Roth joins us. Bill, that's great stuff. I mean, listen, I can listen. We just had Hillgrove on. I could have listened to him and his calls for the rest of the night. Same with you doing your thing with Virginia Tech. Before we go forward, I do want to go backwards with you. I used to do a thing called the old Southern Fried Football Tour, and I will never forget rolling into Blacksburg for a Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech game. And we're ready to start this thing, ready to kick it off, and a lightning bolt. We're sitting there in the stands. I could see this crazy storm coming through the valley. I'm like, man, there's some dark clouds coming up there. And sure enough, right as we're getting ready to kick this thing off, a lightning bolt hits Lee Corso's car, and we were running for our lives. So I thought it might have been the end of the world coming in there. I know you've got a gazillion memories, but that one to me will always be one of the greats that we've never saw the game. Because we never got the game. That was one of the weirdest, most bizarre things I've ever been associated with.
Wow, good memories. First of all, thanks for having me on. You know, two probably anecdotal things from that Georgia Tech game that never happened. That would have been Brent Key would have played in that game for Georgia Tech.
That's right.
And he didn't. And secondly, that was the very first time Virginia Tech used Enter Sandman to come onto the field.
Right.
And then the game never got played. How about that? That was the first time they pushed that button. But boy, some great memories. It's nice. By the way, it's good to be on with you, and it's nice to follow Bill Hillgrove. You know, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and he would get mad at me if I shared this, but I remember very vividly as a kid at Mount Lebanon listening to Bill Hillgrove call Pitt football games. And one of the reasons, you know, we all have someone who, when we were a kid, that we listened to and who we idolized. And I was really fortunate. There were some really outstanding announcers in Pittsburgh, especially Bill. And he's a treasure to our league and a treasure to broadcasters, not only in Pittsburgh, but around the country. And I'm so glad Bill is still going with Pitt football and basketball. So I'm not going to say hail to Pitt on your show, but hail to Bill Hillgrove. How's that?
There you go.
You know what? Listen, if we get a Pitt Virginia Tech ACC championship game, you can kiss the ring at that point in time, but you got to get there first. But listen, Bill's done great work, and so have you. I mean, you've been a part of some incredible moments. We just scratched the surface with that montage. But this game coming up now, moving forward with Syracuse, I don't need to tell you. The Dome has been kind of a goofy place for the Hokies. I mean, you guys have had a lot of great success, but Syracuse, every now and then you get one of those places you're like, man, yeah, we're going to have to do everything we possibly can to get a W here. This game kind of feels like that again, right? You got Syracuse coming off a dud in which they got smashed by Pittsburgh. You guys are on a roll after October, and all of a sudden, here we go. Got to head back to the Dome. So kind of lay it out there. Well, what's been the issue with Virginia Tech at Syracuse?
Well, what you're saying is it's a house of horrors. Is that what you're saying for Halloween week? I would say that, well, part of it is guys like Donovan McNabb and Marvin Graves and Marvin Harrison and Dwight Freeney and Dick McPherson and Paul Pasqualoni, right? I mean, Syracuse was really good. So that's part of it. But the fact of the matter is the last 6 times Virginia Tech has gone to the Dome, the last 6 times the Hokies were ranked. And they lost 5 of those 6 games. and they have not played well traditionally there. Now, again, Don McNabb, Don McPherson, Marvin Graves. I mean, if you remember back in the Big East, Syracuse had some really good teams. So, it's not like the Dome was, Penn State struggled there and Nebraska struggled there. There's a lot of teams that went in there because when it's full, it's really loud. And I think what Coach Brown is doing up there right now is really interesting. And the way that SU has attacked this transition through the transfer portal, most notably McCord, makes them really dangerous. It's not the same team that came to Lane Stadium last year and the Hokies beat them 38-10. It's a completely different SU team. And it's going to be if Bashal Tuten is healthy, that's a big key for Virginia Tech on Saturday. He's banged up somewhat. He did practice yesterday. Hopefully he goes today. I think that it's a great game, and it's not a big rivalry, right? It's not the biggest game on either team's schedule, but it always seems that there's something on the line when Virginia Tech and Syracuse play.
Bill, I was hoping that you could clear the air about Tuten because we had Jalen Lane earlier this week say that he's a little bit of a drama queen, and then Coach Pride cleared the air and said, we're going to play it by air. He is very tough. What are you hearing just about his status? And then overall, just speak about the success that he's been able to have this season. We saw how he bursted on the scene for Virginia Tech last year, but he truly is a dynamic back.
He's as good of a back that the Hokies have had in a long time. He leads our conference in touchdowns with 14. He's a great between the tackles runner. His nickname is Tugboat. We call him Tugboat Tuten. And he's always been really good at that, his low center of gravity, his leg drive and whatnot. But against BC and some other games this year, the Tugboat has become a speedboat. He's been running away from people. And I think he's one of the more dynamic backs Virginia Tech has. He's always been really good. He's a 3,000-yard rusher for his career. I think a lot of the NFL people initially questioned him because of his size, but he's a tough dude. And I know if there's any way he'll play, and by the way, he's practicing. He's not in the blue jersey. He's been practicing. So I expect him to go. He's a real competitor, despite Jalen Lane jabbing him on the program here on Monday.
Bill, you've seen some great defensive players, too, through all the years with Coach Beamer and now Coach Pride doing his thing. This APR, though, I tell you what, 52 is a problem. I don't care who the Hokies are playing. That coach is watching tape going, man, we're going to have to put a couple hats on 52. And again, I'm not going to put him in Bruce Smith status and all that stuff. It'll all take care of itself. But, man, he's a great football player.
He's been a great transfer portal acquisition for Virginia Tech. In fact, the folks down in Gainesville came up with a stat this week, the guys that cover the Gators, since he transferred from the University of Florida to Virginia Tech before the 2023 season, APR has more sacks than the entire University of Florida team, which is great if you're Brent Pry. It's not so good if you're Billy Napier, but
right.
He's a really quick guy. He can beat you to the spot. He's twitchy. They stunt with him. He's really hard to block. He's not a big guy. He's not the size of a Bruce Smith or Darryl Tapp guys that we've had. He's more in the Corey Moore size. But I think, there's a perfect example, guys, of where the transfer portal really helps because, the Gators were going to switch defensive alignments. They were going to go from a 4-3 to a 3-4. He's more of a defensive end, an edge rusher. The Gators were going away from that, and he decided to come back home. He's a native Virginian. He decided to come back home to Virginia, and we're really glad he did because he's been an impact player on the defensive line. So is Aeneas Peebles, and he was an all-ACC guy at Duke a year ago, and he's been really good. So I think as you look at the way SU plays, the Hokies don't play the same style of defense that Pat Narduzzi in Pittsburgh does with blitz every play and everything is man-to-man because the Hokies, they do play some zone and they mix up their coverages, but they've been able, Pack, to get pressure with their front four. And so when you look at Virginia Tech atop the ACC in sacks and APR atop the league in sacks, they're getting it done with their front four, which is probably the key defensively to this game for Tech.
Bill, this wasn't the start of the season that Virginia Tech wanted. They still have an opportunity to get into the ACC championship. But in terms of areas that they've grown the most since that loss to Vandy and Rutgers, what would you say is the difference been with this team now compared to where they started?
Well, the Kyron Drones of October was much different than the Kyron Drones of September. And, of course, it all starts with the quarterback, and he's been really good. We did not know going into Nashville, that opening game against Vanderbilt, how good Vandy would be. Now, I think the coaches knew Diego Pavia, and I think they had a sense of what he had done at New Mexico, but no one actually understood how physical Vandy was, and obviously what they've done against the Hokies, what they did against Alabama and University of Texas. The Rutgers game, the Hokies did not play well. They didn't tackle well. Drones did not have a good game. But since the game at Miami, they've been really consistent. They've been much more physical defensively. Drones was good at Miami. He was good against Stanford. He was good against BC. He scored touchdowns in 3 different ways in last week's game with Georgia Tech. He caught a pass, he threw a pass, and he ran for a score. That's a very unique hat trick for a quarterback. So I think, number one, offensively, Drones' ascension going back to the Miami game down at Hard Rock, because I know you guys keep saying the Hokies are 3-1. Virginia Tech fans have an asterisk next to that one, just so you know. That's the first game that Virginia Tech has ever lost when leading after the fourth quarter.
That's true.
But they played really well down at Miami, and they ran for 200 yards, and Kyron played great. And that you're watching the touchdown catch he had last week. I think he's having a lot of fun now, and I think he put a lot of pressure on himself back the opener. I think if he had to start the season over, if the Hokies had to play Vandy again, I think probably he would be a bit more relaxed. I think he was putting a lot of pressure on himself this year.
Bill, I think we found out a lot about this team and its culture and its locker room following that Miami game. And again, I'm married to a Hokie, and I still have, the ACC Command Center whispered in my ear about, all right, explain to me how that was overturned, which, again, that's a separate show for another day. But after that game, to have to travel across country and everybody still buzzing about how that game ended, I thought the way Virginia Tech kind of just took care of business against Stanford in every facet of the game, offense, defense, special teams, business trip, 31-7 ball game, no drama, get the W, long trip, let's go home. And they've turned that thing around here in October. I think we found out about what this team's culture is, because it would have been real easy, given all the hype and the disappointment of Vanderbilt and Rutgers, and then that controversy with Miami, to just go, hey, you know what, it's just not our year. Catch you later. But that didn't happen with this team.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, the whole Jalen Lane drama queen line from Monday, that's an example of the chemistry they have.
Yeah.
Those guys have been talking about that all week, laughing, because I guess you guys know this, right? Like, ACC Network is on every TV monitor in everybody's locker room throughout the league, right? So everyone's watching, right? So everyone watches it live, and so there's some jokesterness going on, some joking going on our team because of it. But in terms of the chemistry, I think Brent Pry deserves a lot of credit for this, guys, because the Miami game, they thought they won the game. They stormed the field. Virginia Tech wins. The scoreboard shows Virginia Tech has won the game. The equipment guys are packing up. You think you've won, and then they reverse the call. And that's hard if you're a player. And Pride told the guys in the locker room, he said, do you want another shot at Miami? Do you want to play him again? And, of course, everyone said, yeah, of course we want to play him again. Well, then you got to win out. And so I think what he did that night was turn a negative into a positive. It's really, right, coaching psychology 101. The way that Miami game ended is going to obviously be painful for Virginia Tech fans forever. But I think the team used it. They used that hurt and they used that disappointment to really focus on Stanford, and then to really focus on each practice leading up to the next game. And they haven't lost since then. And, if you go back and look, Virginia Tech had a 2-score lead with 7 minutes to go in that game at Miami. And it took a Herculean effort. Restrepo made a miracle catch on a 4th down play. If he doesn't make it, the game's over. Later in the fourth quarter, Ward on 4th down, that 2-hand kind of push pass that really won the game for the Canes. So what Pry and the team, their perspective of it now is, it took 2 miracle 4th down plays and an overturned touchdown call in the replay room in Charlotte for Miami to win a home game against Tech. So we must be pretty good if they play the way they played at Miami. And they have not lost since that game. So I think we give a lot of credit for Pry and the culture that he's built and the chemistry in the locker room.
Bill, you nailed it spot on. I was telling Pack yesterday that I believe that you guys still have a fighter's chance. You still have to play Clemson. And I know you're probably hoping that game turns into a night game at Lane. It still hasn't been announced for the game time yet, correct?
No, I think we'll know Sunday. It's those. It's the 6-day hold, 6-day flex. But the thing is this, our guys, and again, I give Coach Pry a lot of credit. You don't hear any Clemson talk around Blacksburg. They've talked an awful lot about Syracuse, how good they are, how well coached they are, what Coach Brown has done. You know, and the tape doesn't lie, right? You pop on the tape and you can see how McCord throws the ball. And I think for this matchup, the fact that Gadsden's going to play and he's healthy gives SU a huge, huge boost. He's such a valuable guy. And if this goes up in history like some of these other games are back in the 90s, it should be a lot of fun. The Syracuse-Virginia Tech rivalry was never, like I said, it wasn't a big rivalry, but man, they played some great games. And guys like Michael Vick and Brian Randall and Don McNabb and Marvin Graves and Don McPherson. I mean, just some incredible guys that all were in New York for the Heisman. And it was just an incredible rivalry going back to when the Big East was formed, you know, long ago, 30 years ago.
And, yeah, and there's no doubt. And again, you're in my wheelhouse now, going back to that era and so forth. So it's all beautiful stuff. But that game this weekend, noon kick, you know they'll be hopping. They've not had a home game since September. And this one's got all kinds of things, man. It's got the thing that's so great, Bill, about this weekend, Pitt SMU obviously is going to have a huge bearing on who can get to Charlotte. Virginia Tech still got a fighter's chance, as Justin just pointed out, but you got to win out. Clemson's got Louisville, which is a dangerous game in Death Valley. I mean, everywhere you look, there are games that, hey, you do a little scoreboard watching because it's that time of year, because so many teams have a chance to get to Charlotte. And we pointed out earlier this week, 4 unbeaten teams in the ranking. That's never happened in the history of the ACC heading into November. So the race to Charlotte is definitely on, and we'll be watching in Central New York. But listen, always appreciate you being on the show. Great stories, and you guys do an awesome job, and look forward to seeing you down the road at some point in time.
Thanks, guys. Come see us in Blacksburg sometime.
Look forward to it. Beautiful time to be there, too. It's always a good time to be in Blacksburg. There's our man, Bill Roth, taking care of business. Again, Virginia Tech and Syracuse. That's coming up noon on Saturday.